And welcome, come one, come all, to the Dynasty Force Podcast, episode 9, big time episode for the 2020 season where we are going to be discussing breakouts and busts today. We have a lot to get into, a lot of content for you guys. So, Billy, my amazing and well-informed co-host, how are you doing today?
A little bit disappointed right before this watching the Pacers and the Rockets game, and it's almost about certain that we play the Bucks in the first round, so it could be a first round exit for the boys this year.
Yeah, you're talking about your Sixers, right? I'm sorry. I wanted to stay in on basketball and then work through that all off. So the Sixers and the Bucks are meeting in the first round.
Nah, Sixers and Celtics.
Celtics. Yeah.
Looks like our first round matchup this year.
It depends on Embiid. Is he really healthy? Simmons. He's playing tonight, but is he really? There's a difference between playing and healthy. You know what I'm saying?
He wouldn't be playing tonight if he wasn't healthy.
Okay, that's a good point. My point was only that the Celtics are a pretty good team, so the Sixers are going to have to rely on health, especially with no Ben Simmons. So that's a point. My Toronto Raptors are second still. Going to remain second. Tell me who our first round matchup. Nets, right? Looking like the Nets right now, I think. Yeah. Which I'm fine with, and we'll probably be moving on to the second round. Quick question time. We're going to get onto some news that broke over the weekend. And it's going to be talking about Darius Geis, who is no longer a member of the Washington football team. To put it bluntly, he fucked up. He had an opportunity this season to really prove the doubters wrong, and 2 charges of domestic violence and a charge of strangulation later, he's no longer on an NFL roster. So here we are to weed out the Washington football team backfield. Billy, what are your thoughts? We discussed this backfield already when we were talking about crowded backfields in an earlier episode. Not only do they have Antonio Gibson, third-round rookie, they also have Adrian Peterson, longtime vet, who was pretty productive last season. They also have Peyton Barber, who they signed over the offseason, and they also signed J.D. McKissick over the offseason. So what are your thoughts on the Washington backfield for this season?
To be honest with you, I think Adrian Peterson's probably the most likely candidate to get the most carries in the backfield. But fantasy-wise, I will take a shot on Antonio Gagne. Is this? I can't even pronounce his last name.
Gibson. Gandy Golden is the wide receiver. Gibson is the running back.
Yeah, Antonio Gibson. But I feel like his ADP is way too high through the roof now. So if you bought him before all this news, congratulations. You got yourself a pretty good sleeper running back for heading into this upcoming year. But I'll probably take a couple shots at Peyton Barber. He was pretty productive last year with Ronald Jones in the backfield. So he can find himself in a somewhat similar position this upcoming year in Washington. So people always want to buy Ronald Jones. So I'll just be still buying Peyton Barber, and he's probably free.
Yeah, he's I'm sure he's undrafted right now. You could probably buy him in Dynasty for like a third-round pick, which at that point, that's nothing. Personally, like you had it straight on. Considering cost, if I'm going to have anyone from this backfield on any of my teams in 2020, it's going to be Adrian Peterson, who just like Frank Gore. He continues to find a way to be fantasy relevant. I personally I like Antonio Gibson. I like the idea of him becoming, the next big time dynamic running back in fantasy football. But the thing is, he's just not ready. And you can't, like, there are certain players where, like Christian McCaffrey is the best running back in fantasy football right now, but year one he wasn't ready to be the full workhorse, and it limited his production. Now, he was still great in what he did, so he was a RB10 in that time, but Antonio Gibson is not on the level that Christian McCaffrey was coming into the NFL. So while his ceiling probably in the future, as far as like 2 or 3 years down the road, could be that RB1, it's not this year. I think at best you're going to have top 20 running back who has those big weeks. And you're going to be hoping for the receiving work for him more than anything. So, as far as Darius Geis, I want your opinion really quick, especially in Dynasty. Is he droppable?
I don't think he's droppable. I think he's more. I would wait because somebody's going to drop him in your Dynasty leagues. And I don't think this is more of a moral type of thing in fantasy football. It's more of just trying to win games. And I can honestly see Darius Geis fall into a Kareem Hunt type of situation.
The problem for me is that I don't see that. And here's why. Kareem Hunt is much... The situation with Kareem Hunt was much, much different than Darius Geis.
Much worse. There was a video of him kicking a girl across the freaking hallway in a hotel room.
It was worse in that sense. But Kareem Hunt was on the field for 2 years prior to that, showing that he was a great running back, and that helped give him another opportunity. Plus, I mean, they're going to be facing... Kareem Hunt faced an 8-game suspension when he came back. Geis will be facing an 8-game suspension, I think, regardless. But the thing for me was that this was Kareem Hunt's first instance, whereas Darius Geis, if you remember, he fell in the 2018 draft because of character concerns. And now you have this, player who, he showed flashes of being great in 2 or 3 games, but in 2 years has never been able to stay healthy, has had character concerns the whole time, and now is a free agent because of the character concerns. I think a team would rather go out and spend a 4th-round pick on a running back. Who would you rather have on your roster, Joshua Kelly or Darius Geis? Now, talent-wise, it's obviously Darius Geis, but then you factor in an 8-game suspension that's looming. You factor in the character concerns, and when you're running an NFL team, I think teams are going to prefer a guy like Josh Kelly. You know what I'm saying?
Not particularly. I feel like at this point we're talking about free. It's free.
I mean,
free, deepest of leagues. I will be getting Darius Geis off the waiver wire once somebody drops him.
I feel that.
And it's probably not the smartest move, but it is what it is.
My final point would be that Antonio Brown was the best wide receiver in football. And we know his fate now. It's just suspended for eight games. Still, everyone's clamoring about him, but he still remains unsigned. So I feel like teams would be more willing to take a shot on the best wide receiver in football from 2 years ago, even if he has lost a step or two, than a running back who played 3, maybe 4 good games, not even, before having these issues come up. So that's my personal opinion on Darius Geis. What would you spend in Dynasty? Let's say you're in a Dynasty startup right now. Where are you drafting Antonio Gibson?
I wouldn't be drafting Antonio Gibson.
I know ADP will not allow you to draft Antonio Gibson because I don't know where his ADP is, but it's probably in the 3rd or 4th round, I would have to guess. But where would you personally feel comfortable drafting him?
Probably like the 8th or 9th round.
Interesting. I'd probably go a little higher, maybe like 6th round, later in the 6th, just for the upside.
I don't want a Washington Redskins running back, and then we'll talk about the next quick question in a couple of seconds. And I don't want any running backs in that backfield either.
That's interesting because, well, we'll get into that further down the line. But we can move on to the final little quick piece of news, quick question before we head into our main segment, the breakouts and the bounce backs. It is Lamar Miller signing with the New England Patriots. I see this as just really a depth move and that they're not really sure about Sony Michel. Do you agree?
Yeah, percent just means Sony Michel isn't probably going to start off the year healthy. If anything, it might help out James White a bit, but I don't feel it just makes any Patriots running back undraftable for me.
See, if anything for me, this gives a little more hint towards Damian Harris because I think the team would be more willing to give a shot towards Damian Harris than Lamar Miller. So I think Lamar Miller is going to be kind of that third. Well, I mean, Rex Burkhead's still on the team too, so he'll be utilized in his Rex Burkhead, Swiss Army knife way. So I think there's a chance that Michelle is not healthy to start the season. Then following that, Harris will be the Sony Michel role. James White will be the James White role. And Rex Burkhead will be his role. And Miller's just there in case anyone gets hurt. And then at that point, you kind of don't want anyone in this backfield. So yeah. I see what you're saying. I think White could have sneaky value. He, especially in PPR, he always hangs around that 24 to 18 to 24 range just because he's solid.
Yeah, I agree 1,000%.
All right, so without any further ado, might as well head right into the main segment of the show, the breakouts and the bounce backs. Now, Billy has 8 people total he wants to talk about. So they're going to be a little shorter, not so in-depth, but it would be a decent conversation. And then I have 4 people in total, so maybe a little more in-depth on those if they are hot takey, I guess is the word to say. Irrational, whatever you may think. But because you have so many, Billy, I'll let you hit 2 in a row. You can go on and head right into it, and then I will reveal the banner in the exact moment that you would like me to.
The first one we're going to talk about is Cam Newton, since we're talking about the Patriots. His ADP is currently creeping up through the cracks of fantasy leagues right now. The biggest thing is with Cam Newton was health, but he still has a lot to prove. He's currently healthy with the massive chip on his shoulder. The Patriots have a lot of their key defensive pieces opting out as well. I love him as a sleeper for this upcoming year. He has not finished lower than a QB5 in any season, including his rookie year when was the last time he's played 16 games fully in a season. So it's not more of a breakout. It's more of a breakout considering his ADP. I think people forgot about how good Cam Newton can be and the fact that you can get him so late. He's the type of guy that we always talk about that you want to get for a late round QB.
Yeah, the chance to really come out and shine. My one slight worry with Cam Newton would be his age. You've seen running quarterbacks run less as they get older, which makes sense. And the theory has been that Cam Newton has taken hits on his body for so long. I don't think Cam Newton can succeed as a pocket passer. So do you trust that Cam Newton is going to be Cam Newton again?
Yeah, because his best season that he ever had was the 1 year with Christian McCaffrey and then the other year with Steve Smith Sr. And then other than that, his best season ever as a fantasy quarterback, his best receiver was Ted Ginn Jr. So that just shows how good Cam Newton can be. He's the type of guy that elevates the receivers around him, not the other way around.
while you bring up a good point about his receivers, he did not elevate Ted Ginn to the point of fantasy relevance. So that's the one point I'll make. I do like Cam Newton this year. In my last rankings that I posted about 2 weeks ago, he was my quarterback 16, and he's someone that I've wanted to move up a little bit more since then. Where do you have him ranked? Do you have updated rankings?
Yeah, I do have updated rankings. I currently have him as my QB 14.
Okay, so yeah, I was thinking around that range, so that definitely works out. How about your next breakout? You want to head right in?
Yeah, my next breakout is Jerick McKinnon. I'm hearing all good things in camp early about McKinnon, just as he was just as electrifying as he was once before. He hasn't played a lot of games in the last couple of years. Everybody knows that. Even though he'll be splitting the backfield duties with Raheem Mostert and Tevin Coleman, there's a path for him to carve out a role in the receiving game, which is very needed for the 49ers with Deebo Samuels being out. And Kyle Shanahan's hot hand approach may lend him to his favor of being on the field just a little bit more than we are projecting. And his ADP is really late compared to other running backs around him, but the ceiling isn't as there for Jerick McKinnon compared to everybody else around him. So I will be buying Jerick McKinnon pretty late this year in drafts.
So we all know that Jerick McKinnon a few seasons ago signed with the 49ers for a very large contract. At the time, it was 4 years, $30 million on the first day of free agency in 2018, which for a running back is a lot. He was signed to be that franchise running back for the San Francisco 49ers after a career as a backup for the Minnesota Vikings. I don't think that in these 2 years, Kyle Shanahan's love for Jerick McKinnon has faded. I think, if anything, the fantasy community's trust in the talent of Jerick McKinnon has faded. I definitely have been lower on McKinnon. I've said in my arguments for Raheem Mostert that him not playing football in 2 years, I'm not worried about him. But now these reports are coming out. Kyle Juszczyk, fullback for the 49ers, saying that Jerick McKinnon looks phenomenal. The coaching staff is talking him up. Everyone's talking about Jerick McKinnon and how he looks for the 49ers. And while not all camp talk means something, you should pay attention to it. And this is one that I'm paying attention to. As much as I love Raheem Mostert, I have no choice but to kind of, downgrade him a bit this season and upgrade Jerick McKinnon a little bit. And he has arguably as high of an upside as Raheem Mostert at this point. So we'll begin with my first breakout here. And it's someone that I have done a complete 180 on. Someone who earlier this offseason I was talking down all the time, but now I am really starting to buy the hype on Josh Jacobs, running back for the Las Vegas Raiders now. So, first off, Josh Jacobs was great last season as a rookie. He, I believe, only played in 13 games, but he was elite on the ground. Pro Football Focus had him ranked number 1 in evaded tackles, I believe. Let's see. I'm trying to pull up quickly. He had 242 rushes for 1,150 yards. It's 4.8 a carry, and on a bad Oakland Raider offense, he had 7 touchdowns. So that's not bad. And, he finished around the running back 20 range. But I can definitely see the upside this season because I'm starting to buy the idea that he is going to be involved in the passing game. Now, this is something I was skeptical of before because the team re-signed Jalen Richard. The team drafted Lynn Bowden in the 3rd round. and the team also spent 2 picks in the top 3 rounds on wide receivers, on Henry Ruggs and Bryan Edwards. So I was not, confident in the fact that Josh Jacobs would be heavily involved in the receiving game. However, camp talk, just like, the case with Jerick McKinnon, camp talk is sort of making me change face, where Josh Jacobs is saying that his goal is to catch 60 passes this season. Now, you want to know who caught? It's a little higher, but 70 passes last season. Devonta Freeman, and he was terrible on the ground, and he was very useful in fantasy, despite how bad he was, because he caught so many passes. When you get to that high, that 60 mark and above, that's really elite to have in a running back, and it helps so much in fantasy. And Josh Jacobs is great as a runner, and he showed that last season. Like I said, 4.8 a carry on 240 carries, 1,150 yards. He was statistically the best rookie in Oakland / Las Vegas / Los Angeles / their entire history. So, to me, Josh Jacobs is talented enough to where he can command receiving volume, the target share, and he can actually. We all know he can succeed with it. My question was, will he get that target share? And now I'm really starting to buy into the fact that he probably will. Not only with Derek Carr being his quarterback as an argument in favor of it, but I think that the Raiders offense as a whole is going to take a step forward in general, and I think that's only going to stand to help Josh Jacobs. What are your thoughts on Jacobs for 2020, Bill?
I do like Josh Jacobs. My only concern would be, like you said, him in the passing game. But one thing I like about Josh Jacobs is 69 missed tackles forced on runs, which was first in the NFL last year out of all running backs. So he's a really talented running back. You just don't finish first in basically invaded tackles just by being the bum.
With his price tag at a second-round pick right now, I think he's worth the buy, especially, you can get a low-end, first-round running back where, 8 or 9 go in the first round and then have Jacobs as your running back too. I think that would be optimal, or, best-case scenario at that point. Bill, your next breakout.
My next breakout is Hollywood Brown. This ADP is a misprice. I firmly believe that Hollywood Brown will catch fire in year 2, and we will be laughing at this ADP next year. This kid is a superstar in the making. I sent this clip of his vlog series in the GM. I'm a big fan of his whole entire career. Antonio Brown is more than just a cousin to him. He's more of a mentor coach to make him feel comfortable and understand what it's like to be an undersized wide receiver 1 in the NFL. It feels more of like a father-son apprenticeship rather than just like a family friend or something like that he's working out with. People forget that he's still maturing and played last year hurt. But in the beginning of the season, if you look at his stats, that shows the type of upside that he has. If you watch the film, he has electrifying, game-breaking speed, and he has immediate top 15 wide receiver upside for this upcoming year. You're grabbing him as your wide receiver 2 on teams right now in the 6th and 7th round of drafts, and I feel like he's a league winner type of pick this year. On some of my teams, I'll describe to you what I'm talking about. I have Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Kenyon Drake, Josh Jacobs, Allen Robinson, and then Hollywood Brown's my wide receiver 2. And then on one of my other teams, I have Christian McCaffrey, Derrick Henry, Adam Thielen as my wide receiver 1, and Hollywood Brown as my wide receiver number 2. And I just feel like, why is he being drafted as a wide receiver 2 right now in the 6th and 7th round when we're basically drafting Antonio Brown's profile with draft capital and without the crazy personality? It just doesn't make sense to me. I think this kid's a bona fide superstar, and it's just a matter of time before everybody's on the hype train.
So I will point out 2 reasons why I believe people are more down on Hollywood than you, let's say. So number 1 is the Baltimore Ravens offense. Not that, it's not going to be one of the best offenses in football, but because we know Lamar Jackson's not going to come out and throw much more than 450. I think is kind of the max. And while he is the clear number 1 wide receiver, you're going to have Mark Andrews heavily involved. You're going to have the other tight ends involved a little bit. You're going to have the other wide receivers involved a little bit. You're going to have the running backs involved a little bit. So that's one point. And then the second point would be just his size. We have seen smaller wide receivers make it work in the NFL before, but 5'9", and last year around 170. So those are the 2 points why I think people are a little down on Hollywood. Personally, I think he, at maximum, like his absolute ceiling, would probably be that 12 to 15 range, at least for this season. I think most likely he's going to be a low-end 20 guy, as in a high-end teen to, no, about the 18 to 24 range is where I think he will finish, and he will have his peaks and he will have his valleys. And again, not because of his talent. I mean, his peaks will be because of his talent. His valleys will be because of the Baltimore offense and their ability to win the game by running with Lamar Jackson, Mark Ingram, J.K. Dobbins, Gus Edwards, 80% of plays. Your next and your final breakout.
My next and final breakout is Tyler Higbee. I love what I saw at the end of last year. It'd be interesting to see, are the Rams secretly planning to use Tyler Higbee as a featured tight end or something? I don't know how the team feels about the wide receiving core. They haven't really shown a commitment to Cooper Kupp for his upcoming contract, and I don't know how high they are on Robert Woods either, but high enough to make him a wide receiver number 1. But
I've discussed this pretty quickly, but long-term outlook for Robert Woods, I don't see him being a Ram beyond this year because they love Van Jefferson, who they drafted in the second round, and compare him to Robert Woods a decent amount. And the Rams are having a tough time with their cap, which, like you said, they haven't shown a lot of support for Cooper Kupp long-term. It's because they have Jared Goff on the books for a ton of money, Aaron Donald on the books for a ton of money, Jalen Ramsey on the books for a ton of money. The list goes on, and it hurts. It really starts to hurt. So I think Robert Woods will be a cap casualty after this season, and I think they'll work something out with Kupp. But with Woods going, I think Jefferson would be a downgrade regardless, so it would still be a step up for Higbee. But go on.
Yeah, Cooper Kupp, as you mentioned, is more of the type of person that everybody kind of likes, but I think he's more of a touchdown type of guy. His connection with Jared Goff has been in the red zone, but I think that's the most unpredictable thing to try to project year to year is how someone's going to be a touchdown eating in that department. But Tyler Higbee was the most targeted red zone tight end last year. So if he can improve on that for the upcoming season, I think he can really break out into being a top 5 tight end. My only concerns would be Gerald Everett, who's a talented player within himself. But I think they'll be smart enough to feature both tight ends in the offense. Being an Eagles fan, I said this Sunday, being an Eagles fan, I know how the 12 personnel kind of works, where you can have a future tight end and also have a backup tight end still be relevant for fantasy as well.
Yeah. Goddard was the tight end 10 last season. It didn't feel like it, but he was relevant because he was able to catch touchdowns and be used in the red zone. Whereas Ertz, I believe, finished as either tight end 3 or 4. So it could be a similar situation to that in Los Angeles. It's hard to see it being that way because for Philly, their highest wide receiver after the season or at the end of the season was Greg Ward, whereas the Rams are bound to have Robert Woods and Cooper Kupp ranking highly this year. So we'll have to see how it works out for Tyler Higbee. Where is he in your rankings for tight ends?
He is my tight end 5.
Tight end 5. So that is a legit breakout. I think I have him at 8 or 9 in the rankings that I came out with a few weeks ago. In a recent Dynasty League, I spent a 10th round pick on him, and it was just worth it at that point. And then in the 19th round, I drafted Gerald Everett because, what if everyone says, oh, well, what if, Gerald Everett is what they want Tyler Higbee to be? Okay, well, I mean, Gerald Everett is free. So it's not like you're paying the same cost, or it's not, it's not hard to acquire both of them. And I don't know that one of them is going to, or that they're going to eat into each other. I lean towards more one premium tight end, in my opinion. So it could definitely be Higbee. He showed that breakout last season. We'll see if it happens for a long term this season. And then my second and final breakout, TJ Hawkinson, tight end for the Detroit Lions. TJ Hawkinson is one of the best tight end prospects coming out of college that we have seen ever. Drafted 8th overall by the Detroit Lions. That is some extreme draft capital for a tight end. Now, it is by the Lions, who love to draft tight ends early and don't know how to use them with Eric Ebron. But we saw flashes of the Detroit Lions using TJ Hawkinson well last year. Specifically, week 1, yes, it was against the Arizona Cardinals, where TJ Hawkinson had 6 catches for over 100 yards and a touchdown. It was a monster performance, and then after that, he kind of disappeared. Now, I don't mind the disappearing act because, first of all, I didn't spend up on him in leagues to get him, so I'm not, hurt by him. I imagine that a lot of people who spend up on in leagues to get him are hurt by him. So I personally am not hurt by him, but I didn't expect a rookie tight end to come in and be fantasy relevant. And when you watch TJ Hawkinson film from last year, it's a lot of drops or a lot of mental lapses, but he's on the field all the time. He's getting that experience. And one of the questions earlier this offseason from Billy to me about TJ Hawkinson was, is he really healthy? He had a bad ankle injury, I believe week 10 or 11 last season, and didn't get back on the field. But he's healthy now. And he's
looking healthy.
He's healthy. He's the clear tight end 1. Matthew Stafford seems very excited to involve him. Yes, Kenny Galladay's in that offense. Yes, Marvin Jones is in that offense. And they are 2 great wide receivers who are going to eat downfield targets. But Matthew Stafford and how much he was airing it out last season could definitely support those 2 wide receivers and TJ Hawkinson being fantasy relevant. I have TJ Hawkinson at tight end 6 in my rankings that I dropped a few weeks ago. I believe in the talent. I believe that, the mental lapses will clear up a bit in year 2. And I believe that Matthew Stafford will want to utilize his talent. What are your thoughts on the 2020 Hawk, Bill?
I do like TJ Hawkinson. My only problem is a guy like Mike Gesicki and Hayden Hurst are two of my tight end targets around the same type of range. So I don't know how much TJ Hawkinson I will be getting this year, but I do like the talent of the player.
If you have 3 leagues, in one league you take Mike Gesicki, in one league you take Hayden Hurst, and in one league you take TJ Hawkinson, you'd be very happy. I promise. With the TJ Hawkinson league, obviously. None of the others. Just kidding. All right, so those were our breakouts. Billy had 4, Cam Newton, Jerick McKinnon, Marquise Brown, and Tyler Higbee, and I had Jacobs and TJ Hawkinson. And we will bounce back to Billy for the bounce back players. Your first one, Bill.
My first one, I'm going to talk about a running back in a new place, Melvin Gordon. Melvin Gordon is a player that I'm targeting in the 3rd and 4th round of my redraft leagues this year. I think the fantasy community is afraid of him splitting touches with Philip Lindsay, but I think he is not as good of a player as Austin Eckler, in my opinion, who he was splitting touches with last year. Wouldn't we have a different perspective about him going to Denver if it wasn't for the holdout situation last summer and then the mediocre production when he first came back? But from week 8 on to week 8 on to the end of the season, he was RB8 and finished RB14 on the year with missing 1/4 of the games last year. This team has the potential to be very talented on offense with players like Drew Lock, Cortland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy, and Noah Fant. But they're all young in a way, you know what I'm saying? Unproven productive players. You know what I'm talking about. So I think Melvin Gordon is the type of player that I feel like they'll lean on to set up the offense and get them going early on in games and stuff like that. Melvin Gordon is the only RB in NFL with 8 or more rushing touchdowns in each of the last 4 years. So I think he's a type of player that can win you leagues at his current ADP. I would love to have him as a RB2 on my fantasy redraft teams.
So in the redraft rankings that I put out 2 weeks ago, I had Gordon at 26, which I received a decent amount of flack for. And I see the error of my ways a little bit, not just from you, but, I do believe Philip Lindsay will be a bit involved. I mean, he's a good running back. Two 1,000-yard seasons in 2 years, that just goes to show you right there that you're a good running back. But they paid Melvin Gordon for a reason. The contract money that Philip Lindsay is making, they were talking how they wanted to bring in a complement to Philip Lindsay. But you're not going to bring a guy in, pay him over 8 times what Philip Lindsay is making and say, okay, now you're his backup. It doesn't make sense. So to me, Melvin Gordon's the guy in this offense. Philip Lindsay is going to be the change of pace. He may even play sort of Austin Eckler role, but Drew Lock has shown already, and not an inability to pass to the running back, but a lack of want, I guess, to pass to the running back. So I think that in and of itself caps Melvin Gordon a bit, but I do agree on the ground he'll probably get around 260 carries. It'll be a better offense, and he has a nose for the end zone, so 10 touchdowns on the ground is definitely not out of the question for Melvin Gordon. So I do like the bounce back pick. I'll probably move him up to around 18 to 22 range.
Yeah, it's about where I have him.
How about your second bounce back?
My second bounce back is kind of 2-in-1. I'll talk about both the Indianapolis Colts players, Phillip Rivers and T.Y. Hilton. The first one I'll talk about is Phillip Rivers. I love this move more and more by this team. I think it's the best Andrew Luck replacement that they can get their hands on. Rivers coming off a poor season, but I think he'll have a resurgent season with the Colts. Frank Wright was his QB coach and offensive coordinator with the Chargers, while offensive coordinator Nick Sirianni was also his QB coach in San Diego. So there's plenty of familiarity in the scheme, and I think Philip Rivers has the upside to eclipse 30 touchdowns for this upcoming season, and it would be the second time that he's done it in the last 3 years. And then the second player I want to talk about is T.Y. Hilton. It wasn't that T.Y. Hilton wasn't seeing volume last year. He averaged 6.8 targets per game, which would accounted for 109 targets over a 16-game season and a 22% of the Colts' target share. The upgrade from Jacoby Brissett to Philip Rivers will dramatically improve T.Y. Hilton's down-the-field chances, which basically vanished with Jacoby Brissett last year. Even though Rivers was slightly below average for deep ball accuracy, Rivers had 16 or more long throw attempts than the league average in 2019. I like the fact that he'll be playing alongside players like Paris Campbell and Michael Pittman Jr. Even though they're talented, they don't hold the same upside as T.Y. Hilton, who's only failed to reach 1,000 receiving yards twice in his career. There's a lot of pressure on T.Y. to perform in his contract year. If he wants to end his career as a Colt, he needs to stay healthy and do so. My biggest concern would be with T.Y. Hilton is obviously health. He's already coming back from a hamstring injury. So if he can stay healthy, though, I think he can put together a top 20 wide receiver season.
To talk briefly, Philip Rivers, the big problem for Philip Rivers is always that, he can't avoid the rush. Well, isn't it great that he's going from a team like the Chargers, where last season their offensive line was really bad, to this season he's going to the Colts, where Pro Football Focus is ranking them as the number one offensive line in the league heading into this season. So I think that's the huge difference, along with familiarity for Philip Rivers. And then as far as T.Y. Hilton, I like him because you mentioned guys like Paris Campbell and Michael Pittman Jr. are in the offense, and they play different roles. You know, Pittman's more of the Mike Williams type of, and Paris Campbell is more of the Austin Eckler as a wide receiver type of guy, where it's going to be short and close to the line of scrimmage, but he can maneuver after the catch. But Michael Pittman's a rookie. Paris Campbell is in his second season and didn't play really at all last season because of a broken hand. So T.Y. Hilton and Jack Doyle, but those two are really the only established pass catchers in this offense. So if I'm going to trust anyone, I'm really going to trust them. And like I said, the familiarity with the coaching staff and the improvement in the offensive line, I'm interested in Philip Rivers as a low-end quarterback option. He'll definitely be someone to stream on given weeks. It's just too easy to stream quarterbacks, so I probably won't be drafting Philip Rivers, but he's someone to definitely keep an eye on. And I had T.Y. Hilton as my wide receiver 14 in my last rankings. I remember you actually got mad at me because I was ahead of Odell Beckham. So I thought you were going to be talking about Odell Beckham here today, and then I was going to talk about T.Y. Hilton. So it didn't work out that way. But instead, for my bounce back candidate here, I'm going to be talking about a guy that I've shown a lot of love towards this offseason, and he is Philip Rivers' replacement in Tyrod Taylor. I'm going to say Tyrod because I think Tyrod sounds cooler than Tyrod, and they never want to, they say, Tyrod's the right way, but I want to see Tyrod himself come out and give me a little tutorial on how to pronounce his name. Then I'll do it however he wants. But until then, he's Tyrod, because then I can easily call him Ty God Taylor, because he is a fantasy god. We forget how good Tyrod Taylor has been as a fantasy quarterback in recent years. And as I'm pulling this up really quickly, I just want to explain that he is not likely to be benched anytime soon. The thing about Tyrod Taylor is that the Chargers have a good team around him. They were very injured last season, but obviously those players have come back from injury, like Derwin James. I think Joey Bosa dealt with a few injuries. Their offensive line around the board was essentially all hurt. And because of that, they were really bad. And yes, they did draft Justin Herbert to be their quarterback of the future. But the thing is that this is not the future. This is the present. And in the present, Tyrod Taylor is the guy. And Anthony Lynn, as the head coach, loves Tyrod Taylor, has repeatedly said that he believes that Tyrod is more than just a bridge quarterback. He is a potential franchise quarterback. If you remember Tyrod's time in Buffalo, he was very good as a fantasy quarterback, and I've been trying to pull up past rankings, but I'm not completely able to focus at the moment. But Tyrod has always been effective for fantasy when he's been on the field. Not necessarily for NFL teams, but for fantasy, he definitely has been great. And the thing is that this team won't need Tyrod to be a great quarterback to win football games. Like I said, they have improved their offensive line. Their wide receiver core has already been great. Yes, they lost Melvin Gordon as a running back, but they still have Austin Eckler. They brought in Josh Kelly, and then their defense is getting healthy again. And they have easier matchups leading up to the beginning of the season, where Tyrod is someone that, I really think he'll start at least the first 8 games, and probably beyond that. I really think he could start through week 16, and then Justin Herbert kind of get that last week for experience. And at that point, that's week 16 is fantasy championship. So I really believe in Tyrod. I have him as my quarterback 14. I'm looking up past rankings for his history. So while I do that, Billy, indulge in your thoughts on Tyrod Taylor.
If you tell me Tyrod Taylor played 16 games this year and got over 600 rushing yards, then I would probably be on board. I think the biggest upside about Tyrod Taylor is the Chargers' strength of schedule. They play the AFC West this year, and also they take on the NFC South and the AFC East. So those are fairly easier schedule games. And then they have other games, including the Bengals, Jets, Jaguars, and Dolphins, who all ranked in the bottom half of leagues for fantasy points allowed by the quarterback position. So I feel like there will definitely be spots for the Chargers quarterback to be fantasy productive this year, but who that quarterback will be, I don't know, man. I really don't know. I want to say Tyrod because this is the situation that I feel like Tyrod can easily walk into and be productive. But the way the NFL is nowadays and all this uncertainty, they definitely like to hype up their rookie quarterbacks. But Tyrod's a type of player that I'm really watching for to see how they talk about him in this Hard Knocks series. If you haven't noticed, Hard Knocks first episode came out Monday. This season they're doing the Los Angeles Chargers, so that will definitely give a good insight of what's going on down there.
And I did pull up the rankings as you were talking. Thank you for stalling a little longer. You definitely worked. So 2015, Tyrod's first season as the starter for the Buffalo Bills. He was the quarterback 16 that season. He averaged 19.4 points per game. which in 13 games was pretty good. When you rank him among quarterbacks in averages, he would be, let's see, 3, 6, 8. So he would rank as the quarterback 8 in that time. Now I know 5 years ago. And then 2016, which was 4 years ago, he was the quarterback 8 in fantasy points. 15 games, he scored 18 points per game. His last time as a starter was for the Cleveland Browns, and it was week 3 of the season where he got hurt, and then Baker Mania really took off. So really, he only got those first 2 weeks to play. And Tyrod Taylor, and we remember how bad he was for the Browns and how their team looked dead with him in the offense. He was the quarterback 13 in that time. So averaging 19 points per game. Yes, it's only 2 games, so it's a small sample. But in the 2 years that I mentioned of him being the starter prior, we have him averaging about 19 points per game in that time too. So I think he's just being a little undervalued right now. And like I said, I don't believe he's a good NFL quarterback, but I definitely think he's a strong fantasy option, and I don't think quarterback 14 is out of the range of possibilities. Billy, you have one more bounce back candidate here.
For time purposes, we can skip on that and talk about that later on, closer to the season.
Okay. I feel like I understand that it could go. I mean, it's basic, but it could go either way. Really quick, it was Rob Gronkowski. So, like I said, basic could go either way. Not basic in the sense of thoughtless, but he's coming from not playing football. But he could go either way. He could either be great or he could, just be like Dallas Goedert, a tight end 10, where he technically is a tight end 1, but he doesn't really help you. So we'll see about Gronk. For me, I will go deeper into my second bounce back candidate, Brandon Cooks, wide receiver for the Houston Texans. I wrote an article earlier this offseason talking about Brandon Cooks because I think the fantasy community is hating on him unjustly. I understand that he was really bad last season. He just was not getting targeted is really the only way to put it. And it makes sense, right? Like, the Rams had no offensive line last year.
Lorenzo.
And the problem with that is that, you can continue to target Robert Woods and Cooper Kupp, who are more of short target guys. Tyler Higbee, you saw him eat. But Brandon Cooks is a guy who works downfield. And if Jared Goff does not have the time to sit back in the pocket and let Brandon Cooks' route develop, then Brandon Cooks just can't get targeted. So that's a big part of Brandon Cooks' game. I wrote in this article, I took a look at his career targets per game and his targets per game last season. And Brandon Cooks is a guy, where we have mentioned it before, 4 straight 1,000-yard seasons, 4 straight seasons of 16 games. So he's not as big of an injury concern as other people think. Finally, Detroit Beastie checking in here, my ninjas. I've come around on Cooks big time. Thank you, Chris Robin. I appreciate that, because Brandon Cooks should not be viewed as this, no man's land, untalented, old piece of crap guy. He's only 26. After looking into it, he's a good wide receiver. Yeah, exactly. Like I said, last season he just didn't get the targets, which the offense, the way they were built, they couldn't give him the targets that they wanted to. Jared Goff is not the type to be able to roll out of the pocket and create time for himself. Deshaun Watson, on the other hand, who is his new quarterback, is able to roll out of the pocket and create time for his wide receivers downfield. And because of that, I think it gives Brandon Cooks more upside. And a lot of people like to say, oh, well, Will Fuller has that potential. Randall Cobb could be the short yardage guy as far as receiving. David Johnson should be involved in the passing game. But Brandon Cooks is the only guy in this offense who has been the number one in his own offense before. And I think that makes him the most likely to be the number one again. And your question may be, well, he has done it, but he's switching teams, so that gives me worry. Well, like I said, those 4 straight 1,000-yard seasons, he was on 3 different teams for those 4 seasons. So I just think it's very, very likely that Brandon Cooks is the top fantasy option of this wide receiver group, and that he's more relevant than we have him ranked currently. Even I have him ranked currently. I have him at 26 just because I like so many other wide receivers. But I definitely see a world where he's a top 15 wide receiver. Bill, Detroit BC agrees. You're the same person, so you agree with me, correct?
I agree with you, but I also do like taking a shot at Will Fuller later on in drafts. That's more of just a personal thing. Big Will Fuller type of guy. My brother went to Notre Dame, so
Will Fuller is very good. Now, like I said, Brandon Cooks gets harped on for his injuries, even though he's missed 6 games in his 6-year career. Will Fuller does get harped on for his, in my opinion, this season, he would be a lot higher and he would be the clear one if injuries weren't as big of an issue. But injuries have always been in the realm, in the cards for Will Fuller. He is very fast and very good at football, but with that comes the repetitive soft tissue injuries. So I think it's likely where we see a scenario where Will Fuller has these huge games, but they could also very easily come with injury as well. And then we're looking at Brandon Cooks as the clear number one without a shadow of a doubt in that offense. So it could go either way, honestly, on any given week. But we felt that same way with DeAndre Hopkins last year. And if you remember, DeAndre Hopkins got off to a slow start when Will Fuller was on the field. It didn't last. DeAndre Hopkins is good at football. Brandon Cooks is good at football. So I think either way, I'm willing to trust Brandon Cooks. And going right now around the 6th round, like I said, I view him as a legitimate wide receiver 2. He might be a my guy this year at this rate because of the price and the amount of trust that I have in him to succeed. So, for this episode on our bounce backs, Billy talked about Phillip Rivers, Melvin Gordon, T.Y. Hilton. I talked about Tyrod Taylor and Brandon Cooks. And then for our breakouts, I talked about Josh Jacobs and TJ Hawkinson. Billy talked about Cam Newton, Jerick McKinnon, Marquise Brown, and Tyler Higbee. So we have come to the end of the episode. Anything you want to say before we head on out, Bill?
No, I'm good.
All right.
Check us out Sunday on Fantasy Forecasters. I hope you're up on this upcoming episode.
Yeah. I don't have any reason why I shouldn't be. So most likely I will be there, and we're going to have a ton of fun. I haven't decided on a topic right yet, but we will definitely do that, and we will surprise the people with our incredible takes, which are always to die for, which is why you should continue to tune into the Dynasty Force Podcast. Find us on Twitter at Dynasty Force Pod. We're on all streaming platforms now, for sure. Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen, find us. Here on Twitter, we have our episodes. YouTube, find us wherever you want, wherever fits. What you're trying to do. If you're trying to relax, chill at home, just enjoy some good fantasy football talk, it's probably YouTube. But if you're on your way to work, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, find us. At Getting Bills for Billy on Twitter, at Fantasy Force FB for me. Catch you guys next Wednesday, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, yet again for another episode of the Dynasty Force Podcast. Until then, stay frosty.